The Rainmaker is a drama from 1956. Taking place in Depression-era Kansas, Katherine Hepburn plays an unwed older woman who still lives on her family's cattle ranch. She spends most of her time taking care of things around the house for her father, played by Prud'homme, and brothers, played by Earl Holliman and Lloyd. She yearns for the affection of a local deputy sheriff, played by Wendell, but it seems he doesn't harbor the same feelings for her. One day, a handsome con man, played by Burt Lancaster, wanders into their lives. Seeing the effects a recent drought has had on the ranch, he claims he can make it rain in exchange for $100. Prud'homme agrees out of desperation, and soon, Hepburn starts to fall for Lancaster's charms. The film is based off a play by N. Richard Nash, and was critically acclaimed during its initial run. It originally starred Geraldine Page in the Hepburn role, and Darren McGavin in the Lancaster part. Cameron Prud'homme is the only recurring cast member from the play. I mention this specifically because the film retains its play aura. I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like all the characters exist in their own little contained world. It's kind of ethereal in a way. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I love films that feel like plays. There's something so original about them that always catches my attention. I think it's because watching a film and a play are two completely different experiences, but movies like this that are able to tread a fine line between the two mediums give us something unique. I honestly should just make a list of films that feel like this in order to show people what I mean. Most movies of this nature are usually shot in black and white, but this is one of the few I can think of that was done in color. I'm a sucker for black and white, but the Technicolor in this film is fantastic. I think it's kind of a character in its own right. It's clear cinematographer Charles Lang had a specific color palette in mind. The set design in this movie is really something to admire. We really only see a handful of sets for its 2-hour runtime, but you never get bored of looking at them. Honestly though, the best part of the film is the cast. Although I'm curious what the original Broadway cast was like, I doubt they'd be able to top everyone in this film. I think it's no surprise to anyone that Katherine Hepburn and Burt Lancaster do a great job. I think Lancaster's background as a trapeze artist helped in his interpretation of the character. He's a great showman and knows how to turn on the charisma. You understand why someone would fall for his obvious lies because he's just so good at spewing them. He also does a great job of blurring the line between his persona and real life. Like, even when he's just casually talking to the family or Hepburn, it feels like he's still trying to convey a certain viewpoint. It always feels like he's feeding them some sort of sales pitch. But you don't know if it's because it's second nature to him, or if he has ulterior motives. It makes rewatching this fantastic because you can have a different viewpoint each time. One criticism that kept popping up when I was doing research for this film was that people kept saying Katherine Hepburn was too old for the role. But that's kind of the point. She's past the average marrying age, and she wonders if she's gonna die alone. The hot stud that is Lancaster coming into her life seems too good to be true, but he's such a smooth talker that she allows herself to be tricked by it. Now, if Audrey Hepburn had the role and we were told that no one wanted to marry her and that she'd die an old maid, everyone would roll their eyes and call BS. This is a departure from the roles Katherine Hepburn usually plays. She's usually a free-thinking spirit who's fiercely independent. Here, she's a bit introverted and cares a lot about what other people say. There's a scene where she learns that Wendell has declined her invitation to dinner, and you can sense how distraught she feels. Hepburn conveys this like it's something she's gone through many times, and at this point, she's just suffering in silence. So when Lancaster comes up to her and starts telling her she's beautiful and would make any man happy, you start to fall for it too. You hope that this is her big chance to finally find some happiness. Critics praised both Lancaster and Hepburn back when this film was first released. In fact, they were both nominated for Golden Globes, and Hepburn garnered an Oscar nomination. But honestly, I think the supporting cast deserves just as much praise. I think everyone in this film is spectacular and should be acknowledged. Speaking of the supporting cast, Elvis Presley did a screen test for this film. I didn't believe it at first, but there are some screenshots of the test that still survive. Elvis apparently was so convinced he was going to get the part that he talked about it in a 1956 interview. However, according to the book Elvis, His Life from A to Z, it looks like he was never seriously considered for the role. Lloyd Bridges is especially memorable as Hepburn's hothead brother. There's a relatability to his agitation. On top of the drought, it just seems like he's starting to break with everything going wrong around him. He has a permanent scowl that tells us everything we need to know. When he blows up, man, he really goes for it. Scenes where he and Hepburn butt heads are especially captivating. You can feel a family history behind every word Bridges says. Cameron Prud'homme is great as the elderly father. Even though he bears the stress of the ranch, it never drags him down. At least, he never shows it. There's an inherently paternal feeling to him that shines through in every scene he's in. When I first saw this film, I always felt like he was mostly a mediator in every scene, but when I thought about it, I realized that's kind of what most parents do. They mediate conflict between their children. It just so happens it's with all his kids and a stranger. It's no wonder they brought him back for the movie, because I can't think of any other actor who could pull this off so convincingly. Usually when I spot Wendell in a film, I know I'm going to like it. Okay, he has some major duds in his career, but when he worked at Paramount, he starred in some outstanding films. Sorry Wrong Number and Rear Window. Need I say more? This is one of the most complex roles he was ever given. Without spoiling anything, he plays a man who constantly feels like he needs to present himself as something else. else. What I mean is that there are parts of his past that he's afraid of people knowing because he's worried about being thought of differently. This is part of the reason he's hesitant about pursuing anything with Hepburn. It's less about her and more about him. I think this internal conflict is pretty interesting, and I kind of wish more time was devoted to it, but the little we get is still good. However, the actor I'm spotlighting is the one who got the role Elvis tested for, Earl Holliman. Holliman plays Hepburn's half-wit brother who's just as irritated with his lack of intelligence as everyone else. He doesn't want to be known as an idiot. Every chance he gets, he tries to think things through, but it never really works out. Holliman stands out compared to a lot of Airhead characters because oftentimes they try to be funny but drag down the plot. Here, that's not the case. Going back to that scene where Hepburn figures out Corey isn't coming to dinner, Holliman decides to jump in and soften the blow by fabricating a story. However, Hepburn sees right through his ruse, and you can see the disappointment on his face when he realizes she knows it's a lie. He's mad at himself for not thinking of something better, but also for allowing her to find out the truth of the situation. This was actually Earl Holliman's favorite scene he'd ever done, and interestingly enough, he called Katherine Hepburn his favorite actress of all time. How lucky is that? Now, how do I know this info? Well, Holliman told me himself. In fact, he wrote it down on a photo of himself and Hepburn in this scene. Audiences and critics back then loved his performance too. He even won a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for this movie. Earl Holliman was born September 11, 1928, to poverty-stricken parents. They immediately put him up for adoption, and he was adopted a week later. He had an interest in acting from a young age and attempted to start a career in Hollywood when he was very young. However, it didn't work out, so he decided to lie about his age during World War II and joined the Navy. Once they found out he was underage, he was discharged and drifted from job to job until he was of age to join again. While enlisted again, he rekindled his love for acting by starring in numerous Norfolk Navy productions. Not long later, he left the service to study at the Pasadena Playhouse. After a short amount of time, Holliman schemed to get onto the Paramount lot by lying to the security guard and telling him he had an appointment with the studio barber. It worked, and sometime later, he was able to secure uncredited roles in some Paramount films. He was given a small part in The Girls of Pleasure Island, which changed his hair and style completely. Not long later, he was cast in a slew of memorable supporting roles and gained some popularity. During the 50s, he starred in too many great movies to count. He was in The Big Combo, Giant, and Forbidden Planet, just to name a few. The 60s brought about some more movies, but he started to make a successful transition to TV. He's probably best known for starring in the first episode of the original Twilight Zone, and co-starred with Angie Dickinson in Policewoman. As his star power began to gain prominence, he decided to devote more of his time to charitable causes. Holliman was president of the animal activist group Actors and Other Animals for over 25 years, and often organized lunches and dinners for the less fortunate during Christmas time. Since his break in entertainment, Holliman had been working steadily until 2000, when he decided to retire. At the time I'm recording this, he's still enjoying his retirement and activism. I also forgot to mention that Holliman continued to enjoy stage success during this time, and he even received a star on the Walk of Fame. So Holliman was a pretty successful supporting actor who dipped his hands into multiple different avenues. It seems like he cared more about what was interesting to him, and I don't see anything wrong with that. So if you want to watch one of the most respected supporting actors in his favorite performance, or want to see a well-done stage-like romance, then I highly recommend The Rainmaker.